Morning Call, 4th of November 2025, or better known as Melbourne Cup Day. Now, the AI rally continued overnight as AWS, on the back of recent momentum, joined the OpenAI pass the parcel of cash. So there was I think there was a $38 billion deal used to provide computing services and resources to OpenAI. But again, it's just that general pass the parcel. I dare say that AWS was about the only one left that hasn't done a deal. What we've seen as well for the likes of Oracle, for instance, in recent times is despite that 40% odd rally that it had just, when it provided all those cloud services about a month or two ago, it's actually only up about 6% from that point now. So we are starting to see those things cool a little bit. Meta continued its fall, but the bleeding sort of is less severe, I suppose you can say. And Nvidia headed higher just because general AI. Fairly speckled overall. Tesla made a couple of announcements as well. Basically, they announced a new chip. But we've also got that AGM coming up on the 6th, which is going to, which obviously gives the remuneration package and things for Elon, etc. Micron was up after some upgrades last night. Palantir was up as well after reporting earnings, and I believe they continued higher in the aftermarket as well. So yet again, beating all expectations. So some up 3.42 in the day session and up 1.3 in the aftermarket. They beat on every metric there. But overall, it's still a bit of a case of the haves and the have-nots, as you can kind of see here. Berkshire Hathaway was up. I'm not entirely sure how, considering they're sitting on the largest cash pile in history. 381.7 billion, up from 277 billion a year earlier. So Warren, obviously, continuing to increase that cash pile. I think that's basically almost about as much as the Mag 7's holding in cash combined, just about. So yeah, overall, fairly mixed picture. And as you can see, the Dow was down a half, the S&P was up 0.2, the Nasdaq was up 0.4, the Russell was down 0.35. So essentially, again, as I sort of stressed before, it's the bit of the haves and the have-nots. We managed to eke into slightly positive territory yesterday for the ASX. There was a lot of whinging going on Twitter and X.com, etc. yesterday about how much the ASX sucks and never rallies, etc., etc. But it's given our tech sector is an absolute minnow in the scheme of on our market map. I don't know why they're surprised by that, to be brutally honest. So obviously that was Palantir last night. AMD will be out tonight. We got Spotify as well, Uber, Holdings on Wednesday, but that is that they're European, so I'm not sure whether when they'll actually report in the course of the evening. Airbnb towards the end of the week, and obviously that Berkshire Hathaway was released over the weekend, so we can ignore that. RBA rate decision today around the Melbourne Cup time. We are going to be on hold as that inflation number really just did seal the deal at 3.5 year on year, and I think the trim mean at 3.2. Unemployment rate's 4.5. Like any period prior to 2011, to be honest, we'd be talking about rate hikes, not rate cuts. So I don't know I know why people are whinging, but because they just want their house prices to go up infinitely. But with asset prices just broadly across the board at record highs, the cost of living might be more a relative problem than an actual problem. But who knows? So we've got Lagarde speaking tonight and a bunch of Fed speakers. There was a soft manufacturing number out of the States last night, ISM, which is not a government-produced number. Looks like we're not going to get payrolls numbers again this month, which doesn't surprise me, but that's now 2 months. I think the market's just going to have to pray that they're not 2 or 3 in a row now that are soft, because that will absolutely tear the market apart. But until we get there, there's no point speculating on it. So you just sort of got to carry on in these rallies. These big thematic rallies, particularly like the .com rally, and just general rallies of the past, like they tend to always go far longer than people expect and than analysts expect. You can almost see defeat in many of the economists' eyes. And to be honest, I'll put my hand up. There isn't a stat in the world that doesn't say this is overvalued that I can come around to. But except for the fact that I went back and looked at some of these really solid runs, like the mid '90s and leading into 2000, and it was a pretty similar pattern. Even into 07 as well. Like Buffett was going back to cash 2 years before. Michael Burry called the Big Short, basically 2.5 to 3 years ahead. So look, you just got to ride the wave until it peters out, and then apply some good risk management and some trailing stops to the downside. Is probably the best way to play it. I think making big calls about tops is probably not the particularly if you're a fan of shorting, is probably not the best approach at this point, because who knows realistic. I mean, Amazon's now kicked it out of the park. Like, we've got 3 months now until the Mag 7 report earnings again. We've only got Nvidia on the 19th yet to come. So I really, unless sentiment turns extraordinarily sour or we get this government restart, and we get horrible employment numbers. But then again, the market could rejoice because that would be lower rates. So who knows at this point? The old fundamentals, you grab your economics books and maybe just toss them in the bin because they're not really relevant at the moment. Not much going on in terms of, Bitcoin was off overnight about 3%. We also saw uranium get hit, but still coming off an absolute heater yet again. Lithium drifted off as well. There was not really any news around it, to be honest. And look, gold and silver was down 1%. Copper was down 1.23. There was a tweet basically that there's going to be a data center plan pushed out by the Chinese in March 2026, by saying that copper is going to be a bit of a centerpiece of it. But however, grain of salt. Realistically, it was from Robert Freeland, he's been bullish on copper since Moses was a boy. So it's possibly it's kind of like getting your fundamental analysis on gold from the Gold Institute. So quite often, because he's had 25,000 reasons why copper should be at $8 for at least 2 years. So coal ground higher. We did see Australian coal stocks yesterday break up to fresh sort of like year or 6 month to a year highs. Whitehaven in particular. So hopefully we continue to see that rally. Iron ore took a little bit of a breather, but that ever important level, which is probably about 5 or 6% away from here, still holding. And realistically, you probably don't need to be rolling the dice in the iron ore, in the iron ore miners until it breaks up above that. And then I believe particularly the diversified miners like BHP and Rio, all of their fringe commodities have done extraordinarily well this year, rallying 20% plus each. Iron ore's been the drag, so we could see a bit of pressure build up if iron ore starts to head higher, because you'll start to see some really good profits from those guys next year. So, general advice warning: we are a stockbroker, not experts on horse racing. But what we did, in sort of in the theme of the the Macquarie's quants doing a pick for the Melbourne Cup, I came in this morning and basically asked Grok, ChatGPT, and Perplexity their form and analysis on the Melbourne Cup, and then their recommended win each way and trifecta. And then I combine them all into one summary here. So what the AI loved the most, the win bet, most favoured win bet was half yours, which is about $10. Each way was Presage Nocturne, and then I couldn't believe it. One of them in particular was actually felt like a bit of a mad punter. It was telling me what how much to put down, how to put a flexi bet on, the whole works. So yeah, obviously gamble responsibly, people. Don't there's enough. But I took off all the recommended bets, but it gave me a 4-horse box trifecta, which is 24 combos, which essentially. Which I didn't even ask for. So, that was number 5, 6, 9, and 14. And that's Absurd, Prestige Nocturne, Half Yours, and One Smooth Operator. So let's see if the AI has gone any good, and then I'll put it up against the. We'll put it up against the Macquarie Quants tomorrow, and maybe we can see whether it's worth having quants anymore. Today, obviously poor timing, but if you're not doing anything around 12 o'clock, which is highly unlikely, we do have our webinar for those of you who aren't fans of horse racing on Melbourne Cup Day. You can still register. Just go, there'll be the link to the registrations in our socials. There will be an on-demand version of it after we record today. Some pretty decent stuff in there. The stock picks have done very well from the last 2 webinars. It'll be our last one for the year, so get in there and have a look. Good luck today, everyone. Good luck if you're having a bet on the Melbourne Cup, and